Welcome everyone to this special session. AMEC is presenting this session in collaboration with FIBEP. And we're delighted to welcome today our special guest, Eric Meymeur. I'm looking at my pronunciation guide. Head of Cabinet, EU Commissioner Günther Oettinger's Digital Economy and Society Team, European Commission. Did I pass the test? Excellent. Okay. John Kroll, on your left, looking at the stage, will be the session moderator. John has been a very prominent member of both AMEC and FIBEP over a number of years. Nikki Daniels, Chair of UK Media Monitoring Association, Director of Global Content for Moreover, a LexisNexis company. And our first speaker is going to be Christoph Dix, Chairman of the joint AMEC and FIBEP Content and Copyright Committee, as well as being, in his day job, Global Copyright Director, News Intelligence Director, Kantar Media. And what I must do is just go back one slide and acknowledge the sponsorship support for this afternoon's summit sessions of Cision. Thank you for that. So Christoph, if you will go over to the lectern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if you have already heard of Norman Vince Peale. He was the author of a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. In this book, he wrote the following sentence: shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you will land among the stars. I don't know if AMEC and FIBEP want to shoot for the moon by working in Brussels to make things change about copyright, but I am sure that we are already among the stars. Actually, you should know that for nearly 1 year now, FIBEP and AMEC work together in Brussels with the main stakeholders and copyright experts. Last year, at the AMEC Summit, Nikki Daniel and I presented the several decisions made by the European Court of Justice, decisions which have had a huge impact in our industry. Actually, FIBEP and AMEC decided to join their efforts with one view: to be a part of the European debate on copyright and to do our best not to be forgotten in this debate. Indeed, we decided to go ahead together after the announcement of the European Commission about the new copyright directive. The last 2001 directive about copyrights needs more than an update in a digital environment which evolves every year. And the new directive will be elaborated in the next 2 years. Working in Brussels, what does that mean? AMEC and FIBEP are not alone in this task. We are assisted by a public affairs company called Euralia, based in Brussels, London, and Paris. And, you know, they help us to understand this labyrinth, this complex world of Brussels. The European Commission, who proposes and writes the law, the European Parliament, who votes the law, and the national representations that defend their national interest, and, of course, take part of the decisions. During the last 6 months, we met all these people from each side of this triangle. People from UK, from Spain, from France, from Germany, etc. And all these people are specialized on copyright, of course. Yesterday, on Twitter, Eric Mamer, who is with us today, said to a member who is in this room, it's not only a question about copyright. We talk about market, and we talk about digital single market too. And everything we can say about copyright has an impact on the market. And all what happens in the market could have an impact on copyright. That's why Gunther Oettinger, Commissioner for Digital Economy and Society, works with Andrus Ansip, who is in charge of the digital single market. And the next few months, of course, we will meet these people in charge of these questions of the market. Then we are in the middle of the triangle, and indeed, I would like to say that it is pretty exciting. During the meetings, we present to them who we are. They know our activity very well, and they appreciate it, really. Sometimes they are our clients, sometimes not. But beyond the presentation of our activity, we are here to ask for a change. What do we want to change exactly? I would say that in order to do our activities even better, we need first exhaustivity. Exhaustivity of the content. We scan the content. Sometimes we receive it directly from the publishers, or they're mandatory. We record TV and radio. We crawl the web, or we scroll the web. And today, we integrate social media in our product. Then we need a 360-degree media overview. Secondly, we need flexibility. Flexibility in using this content. In some European countries, the barriers to use the content in our production process are very high. And in some other countries, it is exactly the opposite. And with social media content, we may even have to face the regulation of personal data in our servers. That's why we need this flexibility in searching and using the content in our process. Thirdly, we need simplification. Simplification in the process for paying copyright. We and our clients need a simple licensing model, easy to use, easy to understand, easy to work with. And our dream would be in each national market to benefit from an international one-stop shop model. And all this needs to be in a fair European environment. Yesterday night, I was between two wonderful ladies eating a burger with French fries in a French restaurant with French wine after the Mr. French cocktail. And the lady on my right told me I pay too much copyright in my country. And on my left, the other lady told me, well, there is no copyright regulation in my country. And I would like to pay copyright. And I would like to pay copyright because I want to answer to international call of tenders, which ask me to be fully copyright compliant. But I can't. Then I would like to tell Eric Mamer that a large majority of the delegates who are in this room today pay copyright. And most of them pay copyright to the publishers or to the national right organizations. This means that we know how to work with one principle, transparency. And transparency is one of the most important keywords for publishers like the FT, who is with us today, perhaps the most important one. In the last FIWEB survey, we discovered that in Western Europe, 60% of our members work with the licensing bodies. 1/3 told us that they work with individual agreements with the publishers too. And finally, nearly 30% explained that contracts exist between right holders and clients. That's why, Finally, only 9% estimate copyright is not an issue in their region. Moreover, the AMEC survey showed in 2015 that half of all members agree that access to content is now a major issue in the countries they work in. And in total, nearly 40% of AMEC members feel that the lack of international license giving access to content is now a major barrier to developing more international business. And the lack of international license is most likely to be seen as an issue in Central and Eastern Europe, 63%. Such survey show that a large majority agree to pay copyright, but I would say with one condition, one principle. We speak about Barcelona's principle. We could speak about, why not, Stockholm's principle about copyright. Fair remuneration is the first one. So during all the meetings with the main stakeholders, beyond these principles, fair remuneration, fair market, exhaustivity, flexibility, and simplification, we present our recommendation. What do we ask and what do we expect when we meet all the stakeholders in Brussels? I will try not to be too legal, too technical. In concrete terms, we ask for clarification and harmonization of the existing copyright exceptions. What does that mean? To make quotes and titles reproduction mandatory exceptions to copyright, and to make media analysis mandatory exceptions to copyright too. We think that the media monitoring and analysis company have to pay only and only if they send a copy of the full articles to their clients, only in this case. Our second recommendation is to ensure an adequate remuneration of right holders for media monitoring and analysis activities. Again, we are not against copyright, but copyright regulations differ greatly from one country to another within all Europe, and therefore creating legal uncertainty and an unfair market with different treatment for consumers and companies. These divergences lead to highly different prices within the EU. That is why we acknowledge the role and the value of right organization or collective societies, and we encourage them to deliver multi-territorial licenses for media monitoring activities with, again, this principle, fair remuneration. And our last recommendation is to adapt copyright rules to the digital environment. We think that the Svensson decision made by the European Court of Justice last year about free link is not enough. When you send a link, you don't have to pay anything. But what happens if you send the link which includes an extract? We think that EU has to clarify what we call, on a legal view, the communication to a new public concept. And finally, an exception for text and data mining of media content should be created and applicable in all EU states in order to enable automated analytical techniques for text and data. Like it should be the case for science activities, we are exactly in the same situation. We search data, we use them, and we create new products. Yesterday, a speaker said to us, we combine science, technologies, and art. We product. In conclusion, I would like to tell you the story of a judge in New York who affirmed a few months ago that media monitoring and media analysis activities have their own economic specificity. Our American members know that the US market is more flexible than the European one. This court decision was great, was an exciting news for the American market and a huge step for the industry. Indeed, our activities today help to enhance competitive intelligence, strategies, and reputations of broad range organizations. As you are, Eric, our client and the client of many providers here from several countries, you know that we need such evolution, such changes and progress. Thank you very much for your attention.
Right. Thank you, Christophe, for your comments and for your questions or, let's say, statements as to what you're asking and expect from the European institutions. Dear Barry, dear members of AMEC and FEBEC, I'm here for two reasons, in fact. The first is that I work in the private office of the commissioner who's in charge of digital economy and society. And hence, in that context, issues related to copyright play a significant role in the work that we develop every day. And I'll be discussing that with you in a short while. The second reason, as Christophe hinted at, is that actually I used to be the head of the Media Monitoring and Analysis Unit of the Director General for Communications in the European Commission. So actually I was a customer of Kantar Media and of media analysis companies based in France and later in the UK. So I've got a pretty good understanding of the sort of issues that you have to deal with in your daily work. And actually, if you allow it, because it's the first time I have the opportunity, I'll also give you a bit of feedback from a customer. And clearly, what I can say is that despite not being a lawyer, thank God, sorry, I share lots of the frustration that the lawyers with whom I had to work in the commission had when trying to sort out the copyright issues related to media monitoring and analysis work. Actually, thinking back about it, I spent more time, or at least as much time, with our in-house lawyers trying to sort out copyright-related issues as I did with my suppliers of media monitoring and analysis trying to improve the quality of the products they were delivering to us, which was good, but which, of course, I was always trying to improve. And quite frankly, that was not a good use of my time, but there was simply no way around it because, basically, of the fragmentation of the internal market when it comes to copyright-related issues. And print was the least of my worries. It was already a nightmare, but it was nothing compared to audiovisual copyright. When we contacted the BBC, for example, saying, look, we would want to be able to provide the videos that you have on the evening news or on specific programs where you've mentioned European issues, they would say, well, we would dearly love to give you the copyright that we have for those programs, but unfortunately, we only have the rights to broadcast them ourselves. We bought them from the person who actually made the program, and in our agreement, we don't have the right to resell them, so you have to actually contact them and get the agreement from them, by which time, you know, my bosses, the commissioners, had moved on and were not interested anymore. So that is one dimension that I really understand very well. And I'm sure we'll be handling questions related to copyright later on, and I'll come back to it myself very briefly afterwards. But to be quite honest with you, copyright, as far as I understand it, is only one of the issues that you're facing when it comes to digitalization. Digitalization of the media, digitalization of your work, et cetera, et cetera. When I was there, social media were really picking up. They were not what they are today, but Twitter was starting. People were really starting to post messages and have discussions on social media. Web-related news was the thing, and hence we started working on our own and with providers to try to use that in our media monitoring and assessment work. And we got lots of interesting offers from suppliers to help us sort through all that material. And at the time, I'm sure it has evolved since then, but at the time, quite frankly, what we got was gobbledygook. It was really useless, simply because it was clear that we, as customers, and the industry as a sort of researcher, were not able to deal with all the subtleties and all the difficulties of social media and of the web in general. We were not putting in the right keywords. We were not, using the right concepts. The metrics were wrong. You would have really funny websites coming up as being the most important one, being read by Europeans on a specific issue, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm saying this not to criticize the industry, because clearly it was a learning process both for the customers and for the industry, but to say at the time, I really got an insight into what the world of big data was going to be, because that was what it was about at the end. Going through, sifting through an enormous mass of information and try to make sense of it for customers who have very, very specific needs. Now, clearly, big data is an issue that you have to deal with in terms of sifting through the internet, but you also have to deal with the painful reality of customers who always want more, because they know that Europeans, at least politicians in Europe, know that Europeans are consuming the media in many different ways, which is also an issue that you have. How do we track consumers or viewers or readers on mobile devices, on normal television, on the computer, et cetera, et cetera? They want things always earlier. They want them available on all sorts of formats. In my case, they want them available in lots of languages. And then they want media analysis of the content of at least 28 countries with 20, how many do we have? 22, 24 official languages, plus a couple of other countries, et cetera, et cetera. So fundamentally, I understand that the digitalization in terms of what you have to sift through and what customers are expecting from you based on what they know the audience is doing, well, frankly, I don't envy you. It's a tough business environment, which is why I agreed to come here, because I have a lot of sympathy for the industry and a lot of interest in what you do, and I'm myself an avid user of it, obviously, in my daily work. But at the end of the day, over and above all of the legal or technical issues that we have, what it taught me, and that's the feedback I wanted to give, is that it's all about the, and you know this, of course, the client-supplier relationship. It's all about context. And a lot of the issues, I think, can be solved if, with your customers, you have really good conversations as to what it is they need and you understand their business, which requires a lot of time and effort. So, I'm looking at the time. Indeed, copyright is one of the issues that we're dealing with in the context of the digital single market strategy, which the Commission has just adopted on the 6th of May. And it has a certain number of dimensions which may or may not relate to your industry. I will let you decide. The first is we want to make content portable across borders. That is to say that if a European citizen or consumer has a subscription to content that he has bought legally in a member state and he goes on business or on holidays to another country, he should be able to take that content with him, even if it's a media analysis report that he hasn't had time to read in the office and wants to access online somewhere else. That is relatively straightforward as far as we can see. The content-related industries, and particularly media industries, I think will be working with us to implement that. Then there's another trickier bit that we are looking into, which is cross-border access to online content. That is to say, for example, you're a young French banker working in London, or you are a young Polish banker working in London, for that matter. You want to access your favorite programs on TV from your home state. And they're not on offer in London. We want to make that possible somehow. And for the moment, this is often not possible because licensing is entirely territorial based. That is to say, the producers of programs sell the rights nationally. And fundamentally, you then need to get a new license in another country if you want to be able to access that content, which often doesn't happen because they consider that there are not enough potential viewers there. But you've got 150,000 French people living in London, 150,000. You've got millions of Polish people, who now live and work across Europe in general, Spaniards all over the place since the crisis. These people want to go back. Well, they want to have access to what they're used to in terms of content. And that is an issue that we are going to try to solve. And it's a bit related as well to your industry because indeed in the publishing business, it's not always easy, at least for media monitoring companies, to be able to provide that sort of cross-border access across Europe to customers based in one particular country to media clippings, what I was referring to earlier. It's a difficult issue to deal with, in particular in the audiovisual sector, because those licensing rights are what finance the creation of content. And the fact that it's sold country by country is seen by the industry as greatly increasing the pot of money that is, at the end of the day, available to produce programs. So people are afraid of what they think we might be proposing, which is pan-European licensing, which I know, would be nice in your industry. Clearly, if you were able to buy one media clipping and be able to distribute it across the European continent. But we're facing lots of resistance from many parts of the industry because their business model, rightly or wrongly, but that's what the business model is like, is at least partially, substantially based on that. And indeed, the European Commission is not here simply to make content available across Europe without any problem. It's also there to make sure that creative industries in Europe, which are an enormous economic sector in which we are very strong, continue to thrive. And that is based, obviously, on the rights that can be sold to the products that have been created. And hence, we have to find a balance between those who distribute the content or those who want to access it, the consumers, and those who actually create it. And that is going to be the whole trick of the copyright reform that the Commission is going to present before the end of the year. How do we find the balance between those three actors? And many of those actors, the creators, the distributors of content, they say, you've got it all wrong. The issue is not distributing content. The issue is enforcing our rights on the internet. Because there are lots of new actors out there who actually are making our content available to new customers, and we're not getting our share. It's all being done for free against copyright law or disregarding copyright law. Your role, European Commission, is to help us enforce copyright on the internet. And indeed, it is definitely also a valid concern. We all heard of illegal downloading, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we will be looking into and making proposals for next year is how to better enforce copyright in this digital age. That's the copyright dimension of our strategy. And let me say one final word on that. For you, I understand there is a clear internal market dimension, which in a way is good because that's our DNA, to deal with internal market issues and try to make the internal market of the European Union work seamlessly or as seamlessly as possible. Secondly, you have to deal with fragmentation and developments created by the digital age. That's what our strategy is about. And we are customers, so as I say, we understand your issues. The bad news, as I was saying, is I haven't come here with a plan to solve your issues, and one plan that I'm definitely not going to offer is compulsory pan-European licensing of content. That would be death by strangulation in a couple of seconds. So we have to find a middle road that allows us to solve issues such as that your industry faces, whilst preserving the economic value for those who create the original content, which is your data that you use for the monitoring and for the analysis. But as I was saying in my introduction, you have got some other issues, I think, on your radar screen that we deal with in our strategy. One is everything related to big data, to the cloud, to the way all these new tools can be used. And we believe that one of the things that needs to be done in Europe as well is to ensure that data can flow more freely, can be accessed and analyzed more easily. This is where we talk about text and data mining, for example, but also about standards for European clouds, so that data that is stored on servers of one cloud company can be retrieved very easily by the organization that has put it there and transferred to another one if the conditions are better with that new provider. It's also related to connectivity, broadband, because as you know, video content, audiovisual content is increasing all the time, and it's because consumption is increasing, and that requires much improved infrastructure across large parts of Europe. And in Europe, investment on the broadband infrastructure is not, we believe, what it should be. Just to give you an example, there was a study that came out a couple of days ago that showed that since 2008, investment on broadband in the US has increased by almost 40% if you take the 4 biggest actors who contribute most to investment. Whereas in Europe, if you take the 7 biggest who have roughly an equivalent share, it's gone down by something like 5%. So clearly that is something that we need to foster, this investment, and we're going to do that through discussing the regulatory framework for the telecoms industry in Europe, and through a strategic investment plan that has just been adopted, or on which we have just had an agreement between the Parliament and the Council representing the member states to boost investment in Europe in infrastructure and also in digital infrastructure. I think I will stop there. There are other dimensions to the digital single market strategy, but that's not really the point of my discussion. I'm happy to share more with you later on if you so wish. But I thought I would pass on those messages as a customer and as somebody who's involved in the copyright aspect of the discussion. Thank you very much.
You're on a very aggressive time frame to have this process done by the end of the year. What has been the consultation with the different stakeholders that you've actually done so far? And then how do you actually meet that timeline that you're on at the moment?
Well, actually the consultation process had taken place already at the end of the previous commission,
right,
which is why we can move forward quickly. There was a major consultation process that took place. I think we got more than 10,000 answers back from stakeholders on copyright reform. Now, copyright reform, as you saw, has many facets to it. And hence, they're not all on the same issues. They cover a very broad range of issues, some of which we may still have to cover with further consultation process. But that means that we basically have the views of most of the stakeholders. And I can tell you that since the 1st of November, when the Juncker Commission took office, we have not spent one day without stakeholders in our offices dealing with copyright.
Yeah, I bet.
I would say that we were part of the public consultation. We did it with FEVEM. FEVEM is a media monitoring French federation, and we decided to work together, FIBEP and AMEC, after this consultation to join our efforts and just to become a stakeholder.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Christophe. Before I just go to questions from the floor, I'd just like to bring Nikki into the discussion as well. So, Nikki, you've got a lot of global experience with Moreover. You're working with rights holders across the globe as well as with clients. What do you see that's different, or the difficulties that you've seen from the global market trying to get these rights holders into the sort of agreements that you can sell on from moreover?
Thank you, John. I think the most challenging thing in terms of purchasing content for our clients is the disparity between the rights that each of the RROs are able to grant us. So not only within the EU, but on a global scale, we have our clients come to us and say, we would like to monitor content globally, we would like to monitor international sources, we have a number of global offices, and we would like you to bring all of that content into one solution that we can then share across our organisation. And I think trying to standardise those rights and trying to harmonise the permissions that each of those RROs are able to grant to us, it's hugely challenging for us to be able to deliver one single product to our clients and say, yes, this is all the content that we've been able to procure for you, and these are the permissions that you are able to use that content under, because it varies greatly within the EU itself. So, for example, France is able to give us permissions to use content in a certain way that differs greatly from the UK and, again, Germany. And trying to create one final product offering that we can then give to our clients, it's difficult and something that I struggle with on a daily basis, to not only try and understand the laws and the rights granted by each of those RROs internationally, but then try and explain to our end user clients what they can then do with that content. So not only on a harmonisation from an EU point of view, but on a global scale, trying to communicate and understand a very changing and challenging environment. It's very difficult.
We have a debate internally with FIBEP and AMEC to try to find what could be the best model, and we work with the PDLN, which is the Press Database Licensing Network. Andrew Hughes is with us today, and as Eric said, I don't think that the best solution would be a pan-European model, pan-European license, European collective society. I don't believe it. And we think that the territoriality has to be respected. And from my point of view, the best model would be a model when you have a one-stop shop collective society. In France, a French client has just to take a license with the CFC, and the CFC has a possibility to grant the right for all the foreign content, and the same thing in UK territory, etc., etc. So, from my point of view, the best model are still national models, but with a lot of flexibility by using the international content internally.
Okay. Anything to add, Eric? Let's
take questions from the floor.
Questions from the floor. Questions from the floor? Dan Chibel's up the back there.
Dan Chibel, License League. Eric, this, what you're working on and what you put together on this timeline, further to the comments that Christophe just made, so you come up with these new regulations. What are the local states, the local country bodies, what are they required to adopt the regulations that you come up with, or can they say, we appreciate your input, but we're going to do it this way?
You're from the States, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's a good question, because it depends on what the regulation actually says. To give you an example, for the moment, I mean, people in our units, in our departments that deal with this, they say, well, copyright is largely harmonized across Europe. But they then say, but okay, so you have a whole list of exceptions to copyright, you know, for education or whatever, but actually they're all voluntary. So member states, France, Germany, Belgium, Poland, whatever, can decide whether to implement them or not, and actually you still have a lot of free room to decide on how they're going to implement them. There are other areas of regulation where things are extremely clear, where member states have to do exactly what is in the regulation. And by the way, when we say we adopt, it's not the Commission that adopts. The Commission proposes legislation. The legislation is adopted by a system which is a bit like, in the US, the House of Representatives and the Senate, where the House of Representatives is our European Parliament, directly elected by citizens, and the Senate are the ministers from the member states. And you need majorities in both. They need to agree, you know. They then both need to vote on this with majorities which vary depending on the issue. So we don't impose anything on the member states. They agree to what we propose. They usually amend it dramatically, not always in the direction that we want. But once they've agreed to it, then we are responsible for making sure that they implement it. Sometimes it's very, very strict. Sometimes it's very, very loose. Sometimes it's in the middle.
Can the local member states amend individually? In other words, can there be an amendment in France versus a different amendment to the same in Germany?
Well, there are pieces of legislation called directives, which leave the member state a lot of flexibility in how it actually implements the EU legislation in its territory. So sometimes you've got variations. As I was saying, exceptions to copyright are a good example. And one of the key discussions when it comes to copyright at the moment is whether to make those exceptions mandatory and sufficiently precise to ensure that they are implemented exactly the same way across Europe. There are some people who are in favor of that, others who are against it, obviously. And it's our job to try to find the right balance between the two.
Okay. More questions from the floor? Joachim?
Yes, Joachim von Boys from Brussels, Oxypress. Long time in that struggle for the right regulation. There is the problem of the control. Well, we might not really get there, so because it's an implementation by every state who will probably issue the right control instruments to have as large as possible use of it. But there is a question which defines that very much as well, the fair use. How would you say is, how you would try to define the fair use to get as much possible use of the rights? Because today there's a lot of restriction, not only in the price, which brings down very much the use of what we offer. So the use of the word fair use is of a strategic importance. How you deal with that in the new approach?
That is one among many issues that we have to look at the moment. What is fair use to one is utter abuse to the other side of the argument, quite frankly. So I don't have a definitive answer that I can give to you on that. It is among those issues where we will have to try to strike a balance. We have exactly the same sort of issue on roaming across Europe. You know, when you use your mobile phone, what is fair use of your mobile phone when you're abroad compared to how you're using it in your home country? My daughters would say, you know, it's using as much as I want all the time without paying anything else than what I've paid for my national, subscription. Actually, Dad, that you paid.
Yeah. Exactly.
The telecoms companies say fair use. Well, at the moment, for example, the Council of Ministers is saying it's 100 minutes per year of incoming calls, 100 minutes of outgoing calls, 100 SMS, and 100 megabyte. To give you a very, very concrete example where we now have some sort of area of ballpark figures of what we're discussing. I don't think we have that yet in our copyright discussion. So I'm going to, stay put on that one, but I'm sure we'll be coming back to that in the autumn.
I'll just ask a quick question to the panel. Another word, using fair again. Christophe, in your presentation, you talked about a fair remuneration model. So have you got some ideas about, or what's the best position for our industry moving forward, what a fair remuneration model would look like, and then just open it up to the whole panel?
When you pay copyright in Europe for all the industry, I mean, the average percentage of your income revenues is about 8%. But Kantar Media works in Germany, in Ireland, in England, etc. And, you know, in Germany, for example, Kantar Media pays nothing. The final client pays something. So it means that I have 0% of my income revenues I pay to the collective society. So I would say, from my point of view, a right or a good percentage is between 4 and 8%. This is the average. And the maximum limit is in France, because we pay more than 50 and even 20% of our revenues. So why do different things that it exists already? And in Europe today, this is between 4 and 8% of the revenues.
And just to follow up on that and then open up to the rest of the panel. So do you think a percentage is the best way to go, or is it an access and a lower percent?
For example, in Italy, we have an agreement with FIEG, which is a right organization, and you have to pay, the first year we paid 4%, the second year we pay 6%, and the last year we pay 8%. And this is a rate, a psychological rate, and we won't pay anymore. It's very simple for the clients, and for us, we just pay a percentage. The client doesn't have to pay, and everything is well. This is a one-stop shop agreement, and this is good. But after, you know that the NLA has its own model, the CFC has its own model too, PMG has its own model. So again, for me, the best model is easy to use, easy to work with, easy to understand. And if there is just one contact between the right organization and us, from my point of view, this is the best model.
Well, two comments. The first is that I don't think that it's, at least it's not for the European Commission to decide what is the model that should be used by the industry. One thing which is clear is that we are against discrimination. So whatever models are put in place, they must ensure that European customers continue to have the right to shop elsewhere if they so wish. So if a customer in Belgium wants to acquire its rights, his or her rights, from the UK, it's not because they're based in Belgium that you should tell them you are obliged to go to the Belgian society, I think. That is a clear principle of the internal market. Whether you make it, you know, you offer him that service, him or her that service, is a different question. And the second is that if you guys have got lots of agreements, or if collecting societies have got agreements between themselves, be careful about transparency. Make sure there is transparency on the conditions that are set, on the price levels that are set, because what we see very often is that cozy deals are done in back rooms, where one guy gets a better deal than the other. You know, one collecting society that has more market power will get a better deal than one from another country. And that is the sort of thing which then at some stage pops up on our radar screen and where DG competition gets involved, or the DG for the internal market. And the third thing is, finally, it's definitely, I don't think, for us to determine what is the right rate. This is a market issue. I mean, we deal with these sorts of issues when we're talking about network industries. You know, how much should an electricity supplier or an electricity generator pay for using electricity landlines? That's a regulated business. But frankly, the amounts that you have to pay to publishers for copyright, that's really not our business. As a customer, obviously the Commission wants to pay as little as possible. But that's a different story.
You're like every client now.
Of course.
Yeah. Nikki, anything to add?
Yeah, I think when it comes to a fair reward for content owners, I'm a big advocate of collecting societies. If a client comes to me and says they want content from a certain country, and I can find a FIBEP or AMEC provider of that content, and then a collecting society in that country that we can pay the money to, and they can then license us to receive and redistribute that content. I'm a big fan of that model because they can then set a standard. They can pay publishers within their country a fair reward, and it's a standardized model across the board in terms of how much they charge and the rights that they can offer.
Good. Thanks, Nikki.
I have to say that, again, we work with PDLN on this topic, and we think we got a great job, even if it takes time. We do our best to improve fair remuneration, fair market, etc.
Okay. Florian's got the microphone, so we'll go with the microphone there and then to Andrew.
There is one copyright. It's for arts, movies, theater, literature, and then there are press articles, blog posts, tweets, and all that go under the same regulations. And John Kroll pointed out earlier that actually we don't need full copyrights because we don't want to amend, we don't want to change what we have, we just want to get it forward to our client that he can use it. Would it be thinkable to have a special set of regulations for our kind of area of copyright that we need? So we're not in arts, we're just in what media disperse all the way and what users disperse, and which is probably or sometimes even less artistic than what the journalists would produce. Couldn't we have a separate set of regulations that makes many things easier but has limitations to it because we're not artists ourselves that want to work with those other pieces of art? It's just about getting them on to the client and for his use. Would that be thinkable?
This is a great thing I love about Europe. Everybody hates Brussels meddling in their lives. But when industry has a problem, it comes to Brussels and says, regulate it. You know? And this is how you get regulation creep in Europe. And then we'll have the other side of the industry that comes and says, ooh, wait a minute, you know, regulate it that way, or this way, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really happy to see that you know, there are still people in the private sector who look to public institutions and think that regulation is the solution. That's great because that makes my job, you know, have worth and have value. The honest answer is, you know, we are here to solve a specific set of issues. We're not here to provide business models for the industry. When we regulate things, usually it is because there is either a public interest, okay, such as, I was saying, network industries that provide electricity, water, that sort of thing. Or there is a risk that one side of the economic argument, one of the stakeholders has such a dominant position that we need to intervene in order to rebalance the situation. Now, this is one of the issues that you are familiar with. There's a lot of debate at the moment with the role of big internet platforms that actually are active also in your line of business nowadays by providing links to articles, sometimes the first snippets of the article, et cetera, and where, you know, we have seen that national attempts at regulating this have not necessarily been successful, be it in Spain or in Germany. And people are saying, European Commission, it is pretty clear that the current set of regulations that exist are not going to deal with the issue. Please have a look and see whether there is a need to adapt it. Actually, some people tell us, you need to intervene. You need to step in and solve this. Others are saying, not at all. It's an extremely fluid situation at the moment. The actors that are dominant now didn't exist 10 years ago, and they're already being contested by others. So be very careful before you step in. So what we've said, for example, on that is we're going to look at it, try to understand the situation, and see if we need to intervene. As far as, you know, media monitoring is concerned, my view is that it should really be up to the market to solve most of the issues. that there are real difficulties linked to fragmentation, that is to say, the fact that the regulations that exist across Europe are very different. But it's not about saying, we want to have one regulation that basically exempts one part of the economic argument from having to pay this or that type of copyright. It's an issue, for example, with text and data mining. We have got the research community saying, we want to be able to practice text and data mining in a much more coherent manner than we currently can in Europe, because in some countries it's relatively easy to do, in others it's unclear, in others it's not possible. And the Commission has to decide, for example, whether this should be, of course you've got big publishing houses, I won't name them, but some who say, wait a minute, this is our content. You want to grant access to our content completely freely for people to download, potentially, copy with with what safeguards? How do we know it's not going to be abused, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to determine where is the public interest for regulatory intervention. For example, some people say it should only be public research. Others say, no, it doesn't matter who's carrying it out, it should be for research in general, because it's linked to competitiveness. And then you start getting in all the shades of gray, if I may, that are related to that. Well, as I said, I don't think we're going to solve this through regulation on its own, but part of the things we will be presenting in the autumn could have relevance for you, and it's important that you make your voice heard, which is why I came here today.
So we've just got one quick question from Andrew, and it's just if we can get a microphone to Andrew Hughes there, and then we'll be wrapping up.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Yeah, Andrew Hughes from PDLN, so the other side of the debate, possibly. Not so much a question, if you don't mind, John, but just I wanted to really remind the audience that a regulatory solution could be the worst of all worlds for everyone. I mean, the reference point as to what people pay may very well be what people are paying for other online information use, and the standard, if you're LexisNexis or Factiva, is 25%. It's not 4 or 8. But I really appreciate the invitation to be here and previous events, and I really appreciate the work that a lot of people in the room are putting into trying to create a dialogue to knock the edges off this, because market solutions are going to be the best solutions. I think in that, obviously, the copyright bodies have to themselves are regulated bodies. We're a regulated body, and the process for regulating and the pressure they're under to be more transparent coming from the Commission is a really good and healthy thing. So I think there has been some progress, not nearly enough, as Jeremy reminds me, but Jeremy and Florian are both going to be at our event next week. And I hope they'll be responding to the challenge we set them last year, which is to come forward, not so much with general complaints, but with specific suggestions on how we move forward. And we have moved forward a lot in the last year or two. With AMEC and FIBET, we've created the Rights Knowledge Exchange to make more transparent what rights are available, where they're available from. And that itself has surfaced some of the, and the work Christoph has done, has surfaced some of the discrepancy on pricing, and that gives us something to aim at. This is still largely a national market, and the problem Nicky's talking about is how different national models that have rightly evolved for those national markets collide when they meet an international customer. And I have to say I'm personally very aware that the pain that the Commission, which obviously takes a very responsible position on copyright and tries to get agreements with all 28 members, the pain they must have been through is one which I don't envy to them, but they're meeting at the junction point of that. I'll stop there, but I really did want to just encourage us all to work through our representative bodies to come up with better solutions. PDLN's committed to doing that, and I hope you are too. I also wanted to thank Eric for a really, really good presentation of where the EC is on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for coming, and thanks for wrapping it up, because Barry was giving me the big circle, so you don't want to get on the way of that. So, look, would we all thank Eric, Nicky, and Christoph, not just for the time they gave, but the knowledge, the insights, and the openness in which they discussed the whole very complex copyright area. So thank you very much.
Thank you.